In my 100 Years of Broadcasting exhibition video, I will be discussing how broadcasting was used during the First and Second World Wars. I will be looking at different aspects of the wars and life both during and after them, and talk about how broadcasting informed or persuaded the public, and also the benefits that it brought to Britain. This discussion will be set to relevant footage collected from the Scotland on Screen video archive. At the Palace Cinema in Edinburgh on the 4th of August 1914, only 7 days after the war first started, the film Scottish Troops for the Front relies on its visuals, since there is no sound, to show what it was like to be a soldier in the earliest period after the outbreak of World War I. It could be argued that this film showed being a soldier in the First World War was somewhat fun, since they are only showed watching a boxing match, being tossed up in a blanket, and participating in parades. The closest we get to the front is the troops walking to or from there. Films depicting that walk had been popular since at least the Boer War, and we can find films from said war dating back to 1899. Even at the very start of the First World War, broadcasting was used to raise support for the war, and this film was likely to have unintentionally increased recruitment rates, since it showed war to be an enjoyable experience. This next film is another one that heavily relies on its visuals. Scottish Moving Picture News 32, shot in early 1918, is about a campaign started by the British government to sell war bonds by touring military tanks around Scottish cities. In the film, we see a tank numbered 113, named Julian, in Aberdeen, Dundee and Edinburgh. In one of the intertitles, we see a quote from the Lord Provost Taggart, in which he said, "We want your money not to continue, but to end the war." This is possibly acknowledging the public's feelings of hesitancy about the war. The aim of this film was to promote fundraising for the war and is an example of broadcasting being used to help Britain during the war. This is shown through another one of the intertitles, in which it tells viewers to save all they can and lend all they can to their native land. This message was for people who could not take active service or make munitions of war. Freedom of Aberfeldy is a good example of the promotion of the war effort during World War II. This was one of many short information films and homefront propaganda videos produced by Campbell Harper Productions during the Second World War, most of which were commissioned by the Ministry of Information and the Scottish Office. In the film, we see the town of Aberfeldy in Scotland almost deserted with all of its men away at war. Throughout, we follow 3 soldiers invited to spend their leave there. I chose this clip because it introduces Allied soldiers of other nationalities to the general public. It also helped to influence housewives to make soldiers welcome in their homes who cannot spend their leave with their families, and to treat them like one of their own. The short film Fitness Wins 4 and 20 Fit Girls was part of a national 3-year campaign for health and fitness that was organised by the National Fitness Council for England and Wales. They oversaw the issuing of grants to local authorities so they were able to run fitness classes like the one you're seeing now. I picked this clip to show how this government organisation used the film to promote health and exercise to civilians during the Second World War. The short film Brian Welcomes Raffles was an amateur film released in 1943 from director Enrico Cacosa. In this film, we see a World War II airman named Raffles on his return home from leave being greeted by his family. This film, being a dramatised account, shows a different side to filmmaking during World War II, as many were documentary-style or informational films commissioned by different branches of the government, which typically showed things the way they wanted the public to see it. While the last film showed us a soldier returning from war and being greeted by his child, this one shows us what life was like for children when they were away from home. Originally a house built for James Murray of Broughton in 1793, then becoming a hotel in 1934, Calais House was used during World War II as a co-ed residential secondary school for approximately 200 evacuated children from in and around Glasgow. The film Calais House was made by the Ministry of Information in 1942 for the Scottish Education Department. The filmmakers were highly experienced in documentaries, making this look like one rather than propaganda, aiming to boost morale through its positive messages and theme of community.
Spells of gardening come as a timely reminder that a healthy nation depends as much upon its fields as upon its busy pavements.
This statement was made by the narrator of the film, and its accompanying visual shows the children doing some gardening. This can be interpreted as a prompt for the public to keep growing their own crops for food, and that doing so is just as important as the people who work in big cities doing jobs like making munitions. This prompt links heavily into the Dig for Victory campaign, which was spearheaded by the British Ministry of Agriculture. Another film that reminds viewers of the importance of food during the war is the collection of food flash short films. Created by the Ministry of Food, this publicity campaign ran from March 1942 to November 1946, and its purpose was to help the public to stretch out their rations. An estimated 20 million British citizens saw these films in cinemas. Lord Woolton was the Minister of Food for over 3 years of the 6-Year War, and so was vital in the creation and promotion of rationing. These short films show how the government used film to educate the public on how to make their rations last longer, how to reduce wastage by using every single part of their food, and promoting the use of rationing. Queen Elizabeth was vital for morale during the Second World War. In the film Vanguard Ship No. 567, shot by Upper Clyde shipbuilders on November 30th, 1944, we see the then Princess Elizabeth launch the HMS Vanguard battleship. This was the first time the late Queen had launched a ship, and she received the Vanguard Rose brooch, fashioned after the Rose of England as a souvenir. Queen Elizabeth is pictured here wearing the brooch almost 77 years after receiving it during a Royal Windsor Cup polo match in July of 2021. The visuals of this film are very shaky, and so was clearly made as a record rather than for mass public consumption. However, we can see shots of a BBC microphone, meaning that this was possibly broadcast over the radio. Events like this, undertaken by all members of the royal family, were imperative to keeping up the morale of the British public. Even after the war, Elizabeth was still doing her part. Post-war Britain was in extreme austerity, with rationing still in full effect. 2 years after the war ended, the princess was due to get married, and so to lead by example, she saved up her clothing ration coupons to help pay for her wedding dress. The coverage of this royal wedding was unprecedented for the time, and most of the day was captured on film due to advancements in camera technology. The event was broadcast on BBC Radio to approximately 200 million people, and then shortly after, newsreel footage was shown in cinemas across the country. Since the day was going to be so widely viewed and the war was still so fresh in the minds of the public, King George VI was advised to keep it relatively simple. This was to preserve the morale of the UK. In keeping with the anti-German sentiments of the time, none of the family's German relations, nor Prince Philip's sisters, who were all married to German princes, were in attendance. It can be argued that the royal wedding, from the broadcasting of it to the small details of the day itself, was all an attempt to help boost the morale of the public. Also, to show them a new and imminent age of Britain under the ruling of the future Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.